Hola, ¿qué tal? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Meg James, your Move to Spain mom, and we are at episode Treinta y cuatro? Incredible. And today I want to talk all about why Spain. So you may be an example of a family who could live anywhere and you're choosing Spain. And so I want to talk about why our family chose Spain out of all the other European, possibly country options, and the surprising 5 countries that I just named on Instagram to my community that we would consider living in. I've traveled to over 30 countries, and out of the 30, there are only 5 countries we actually would live in. So let me unpack it a little more and share why. Okay, you heard it right. Out of 30 countries, there are only 5 countries that I personally would live in with my family. Some of them may surprise you, but let's just unpack them a little bit more, and then I'll talk about why we didn't consider other European countries. Now, just as an overall statement, we were not trying to leave the US in 2023 when we left with any negative intention. We were not an American family, and you will not find America bashing, US bashing here, because we were not trying to escape kind of from anything. We were just trying to see what else was out there. We didn't want to only live in the US our whole lives. We wanted to raise our boys with a cultural immersion and to experience what different cultures were like and have a different travel experience and be on a different continent and just all those things. And so you will not hear us complaining about the US here. There are 5 countries that we would consider living in, and we considered living in 2023 before we chose Spain. The first of those is Nicaragua. Nicaragua may surprise you because it has a very unstable political environment kind of at the moment, and it did in 2023. However, we found a really cool community that was right on the border of Costa Rica, but on the Nicaragua side that really won us over. In fact, Nicaragua is the first place where we thought, okay, we might really want to live abroad, not just travel. So don't count a country out without kind of exploring it or going yourself to see, because we were really surprised by Nicaragua. In fact, in around maybe February of 2023, I called my dad in the US and said, I think we're gonna move to Nicaragua. And he said, the heck you are. And so my dad was way more concerned about safety and some of the other things that maybe we didn't think about in full, but Nicaragua is still a beautiful country with wonderful people, and that would be one we would consider moving to. Number 4 is similar or nearby is Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a recent haven for US Americans moving abroad, and there's many reasons why. It has a great political environment, it's very stable, it is great in climate, very moderate climate. Now, I found it to be a little bit too humid for me there, and the turnoff to me in Costa Rica were the bugs. We have gone 2 or 3 times to Costa Rica, huge bugs, like, bigger than your head kind of bugs. And the schools that we did have calls with to consider moving abroad to Costa Rica, I just never felt like a full-on connection with, but I do think Costa Rica is a really strong choice. So that's number 4. Number 3 for us is actually Malta. We loved Malta. Malta is the one country in Europe that I think we actually would consider living in instead of just visiting. What we loved about Malta is the tax structure. They have a wonderful tax structure for US freelancers that live abroad. It's something like a flat 22 or 24%, so it's very similar to the taxes you would have in the US. The culture is very cool. It's like a mix of different languages. People speak the Maltese language, but then they also speak English, and you hear it's just a really cool melting pot of cultures. There's a lot of good biblical influences that are there. We loved exploring Medina and Rabat and some of the really awesome places there. So that one's super high on our list and intrigues us. And honestly, it's my European backup plan. So Malta is number 3. Number 2 is moving back to the US. So we are not a family who would say we would never move back to the US. As I said in the beginning of this video, we are very proud to be Americans from the US. Now, I know the political environment and some of the changes that are happening and the gun safety and a bunch of factors are good reasons not to live in the US at this moment. But although I do prefer raising our boys outside of the US, it doesn't mean I wouldn't live back there. So we have no plans to return to the US for schooling anytime in the near future. In fact, our boys may end up going to university abroad. But I think it's just important to note that we would move to the US. And then number 1 is obviously Spain. Spain hit a lot of things on kind of the head for us in the fact that it's a stable environment. It has its own political issues, but especially if you're not super immersed fully in the language, you don't really get involved in the political issues. It has just really good climate, such a great places to explore nearby, the beautiful Spanish sunshine, the mentality that work is not the priority and family is, and the food. And so there's so many things we love about Spain. It's not perfect, but it definitely is the #1 spot. So why did we not consider other European countries? Let's get into that. My goal is not to bash other European countries because I know a lot of people have chosen them for their home and they're wonderful. We've enjoyed visiting a lot of the European countries, but didn't see ourselves living there. The culture is really important to view yourself firsthand before you decide, obviously, to move abroad. So the first thing you should do if you're considering a move abroad is actually go. Spend time. I think a month is the perfect amount of time. I wouldn't want to spend less than a month somewhere before I decided to move there. And so that's what we did. We spent a month in the Canary Islands of Spain in Tenerife, decided we loved it, came back on visas, lived in Madrid, and now we're moving to Estepona in southern Spain. And so I think going through the countries, these are the reasons why our family at least decided not to proceed with them as our choices. So the first one would be like the UK. We've been to Scotland and we've been to England. We've been to England quite a bit because my husband works for a London company at the time of filming this. And so London and Scotland are so cool. They have the environment of being English speaking, which is an advantage, especially because language immersion is a little bit harder for an adult. But the weather, for us, it's the weather and the expenses. We found London to be so expensive. The cost of food, renting a rental, just the whole thing. But honestly, it's the lack of sunshine for us that we couldn't do. So that made the UK out. A second country that comes to mind is France. A lot of expats or immigrants consider France for a home country. I have been twice, once as a child, and then we took our kids a year ago or 2 years ago. I wasn't won over by the culture there. I mean, I know the food is excellent. I just didn't find the culture to be as family friendly or kid friendly in France. It just wasn't an area that I ever could see myself living in. So it just is what it is. Italy is a place we have not been to mainland Italy yet, but we did go to the islands of Italy and Sardinia. Italy is so beautiful. Obviously, the food is probably the best of any that I've even said. The thing with Italy that surprised us is it felt very rushed. Like at restaurants too, it didn't have that kind of sitting back and sobremesa kind of feeling like you have in Spain where you're not rushed and you enjoy family time at dinner. Italy felt more rushed. And so we just couldn't see ourselves living there. It was somewhere definitely to visit. Excuse me, we've been to Monaco, and Monaco was a place that we thought was so cool. It was just so different, but not to live. It's so ridiculously expensive. It felt more like a luxury vacation than somewhere I would live, and it's very small, which limits, school choices and things. So that one would definitely be out. Another country we've been to is in Eastern Europe. We have had mostly opportunities to visit countries in Western Europe, but we have been to Romania in Eastern Europe. Now, we did go over winter and we had a cool travel experience. We went to Transylvania. So, think of Dracula and those movies. It was just so cool to see that area. We stayed at an awesome place. We had a wonderful trip, but we never really saw ourselves living there. And honestly, the takeaway from visiting was that we had less interest in Eastern European countries than we did Western. Western European countries seemed a little bit more developed and they seemed a little bit more like some of the things we are used to in the US. And so that's why I wouldn't consider Romania and the weather too, to consider for moving long term. Trying to think of the other countries. We've been to Germany, we experienced Berlin, and that environment, I think that language to us was so hard. We didn't really understand the German culture. It felt a little bit cold to us. It was August when we went, and so we expected it to be much warmer than it was, but it was quite cold and the people were not very friendly. So that was at least our experience. I have immigrant friends from the US that live in Germany and have a wonderful experience. But for us, we definitely could not see our family living there. Now for the big one. The biggest question I get from people is, why wouldn't you consider Portugal in your top 5? Now we've been to Porto, we have not yet been to Lisbon. And Portugal was beautiful. We had a wonderful rental, a great experience, such friendly renters that we stayed in their house. Loved the food and the environment. I think at the end of the day, it was so beautiful, but I just saw ourselves more in a Spanish culture than a Portuguese culture. And from a language learning perspective, our boys are now immersed in a school environment that has Spanish language. Our kids have made such great strides in Spanish language that although it can be a little bit similar in Portuguese, I just wouldn't consider changing that up. I think Spanish is a little bit more of a universal language, especially if you live in the US, to learn, where Portuguese could be a little more restrictive than Spanish. So at the end of the day, I could see how Portugal is probably number 6 on our top 5 list of places that we would consider living. We just didn't feel a connection like we do in Spain, in Portugal. And so those are the countries that we would consider living in and the reasons that we do not consider other European countries. You know, Spain has its own issues with taxes and some of the negatives that come along with navigating a more complex tax and visa system. But I do find it to be worthwhile. We're here getting ready to do our year 3 and 4 and hopefully 5 for a 3-year visa renewal. And the process is hard. It's worth it though. It's worth going through because we truly feel at home in Spain. It has so much what we loved about that Nicaragua, Costa Rica lifestyle, in the US, the lifestyle, and then rounding it out being in Europe and Spain. So we're gonna continue sharing content. I have a few more weeks here to be sharing from Madrid, Spain until we come to you live from our new home in Estepona, Spain. You are not sure what country to consider moving to. I want to introduce you to Lanciar Global. It is an awesome connection for American families that help you decide what the best country for you and your family is. So I'm gonna put that information here and contact them now and just let them know that you heard about them through Go and Do Good.